All right, we continue to move along the Ed Dean Radio Show, heard all throughout the state on AM and FM talk radio stations. My email address is ed@eddean.com, ed@eddean.com. The Navy SEAL Museum, we're picked up and down the Treasure Coast on radio stations down there. They've got a big event going on this week. It's the third annual Bridge Challenge, and this is with the Navy SEAL Museum. And, of course, Brian Mast, who is a congressional candidate, is going to be competing with teammate Congressman Ryan Zink. Is Ryan another opponent in this race, Brian?
No. Ryan Zinke is a former SEAL Team 6 member, and he's the one congressman out of Montana.
That's who it is. All right.
Campaigning.
Forgive me of my ignorance. I apologize about that. I'm looking at some of the things here. But Brian Mast, of course, is running. He's one of those in the Republican primary running for Congressional District 18. Yes, folks, this is the top one in the country, where Patrick Murphy is resigning to run for the U.S. Senate race, which is being resigned by that of Marco Rubio. This is going to take place this Saturday, May the 21st, in Vero Beach, beginning from the dock at Riverside Cafe, which, by the way, many of you know I'm a big fisherman. That's where I go for lunch a lot of times when I am taking a break from fishing. It's going to be at 8 a.m. Again, you're going to team up with Montana's Congressman Ryan Zinke, who is another U.S. Navy SEAL veteran. Brian, your background in the military. Tell the audience what it is.
Well, I spent about 12 years in the U.S. Army. I was a bomb technician in our highest level of military special operations. And most people who look at me realize that I found one bomb too many, as it resulted in the loss of 2 legs and a finger.
Brian, when you came back and your challenge to be able to walk again, what military groups or what military charitable groups was beneficial for your survival?
I have some of my absolute favorite military nonprofit organizations out there. One of my favorites is a group called Help Our Military Heroes, and they actually provide wheelchair vans for the veterans that wake up in places like Walter Reed Army Medical Center. We all drive our F-150s, and after you suffer a traumatic injury like this, you can't exactly climb up into your F-150, throw your wheelchair out in the back, and so they help to get the guys and the girls wheelchair vans so they can just resume that normal routine of life, being able to drive themselves from A to B. That's probably hands down one of my favorite nonprofit organizations.
I met Brian, and the reason why I asked that because, Wounded Warriors and a few other of these groups are getting pretty heavily scrutinized on the amount of money they spend. So, but I wanted to figure out, and by the way, other people want to know what other good charitable groups, as you say, nonprofit that help out the military. By the way, we got another segment coming up here. We're going to be talking about that here in a few moments. But I met Brian. I was on assignment for Sunshine State News, who I write for, and I met Brian at an Oliver North event. He was one of the guest speakers, and Brian was, we came up and we knew of each other. Brian, when did you lose your legs? I want you to explain this to the audience.
Well, I was injured September 19th, 2010, while serving in Afghanistan. The group that I was a part of, we only worked under the cover of darkness. It was all missions very similar to the Bin Laden raid, where we were going after very specific targets under the cover of darkness. And it was our job to either kill or capture the individuals that we were going after. I came to a spot on the battlefield as I was leading my assault force that I basically told them, if I was a bomber, this is exactly where I would put a bomb. They needed to let me check things out, and I did. I looked with every way that I could to find a device buried there or a tripwire or anything else. I couldn't find it until ultimately I stepped on the device.
And when you came back to the States, and I'm sure you and we'll do it another time, I think we could spend a half hour on this issue of what you had to struggle with, but yet you walk on what for the audience, because you walk very well.
Yeah, I'm on 2 prosthetic legs. I'm amputated a couple inches above where my kneecaps were. And, when I woke up in Walter Reed Army Medical Center, I can tell you my single biggest goal was to get out of that place as quickly as I possibly could and get back to resuming a normal routine of life. I knew if there's one thing that I didn't want to do, it was to sit there in a hospital bed and let my life pass me by. And that's actually what brought me to running for Congress, is when I was laying in a hospital bed, really in a much more emotional time of my life, where I was telling my wife that I just couldn't go through and have the best that I've ever given our country be something that was in my past. I had to find an upward trajectory, and I had to find a new battlefield, and I decided that ultimately that would be Washington, D.C. if my community would have me.
We're talking with Brian Mast. The website's Mast, M-A-S-T, mastforcongress.com, mastforcongress.com. He's one of the individuals running for the U.S. House of Representatives on the Republican aisle for Congressional District 18, which is down the Treasure Coast. Many of you know what that area is. You know, the West Palm, Fort Pierce down. I mean, it covers within that range down in that area. Brian Mast, of course, served in the U.S. Army for 12 years as an explosive specialist under the Department of Homeland Security. I want to get more back with you in a moment, but you are involved in this area coming up this Saturday, May 21st, which begins at the Riverside Cafe in Vero Beach at 8 a.m. You will compete again with Montana Congressman Ryan Zinke at the 3rd Annual Bridge Challenge. Before I go more back into you and your campaign, explain to the audience what the 3rd Annual Bridge Challenge is.
Bridge Challenge, no question, one of the hardest challenges that you're going to face in the Treasure Coast. There's a number of events that are a part of it. Of course, they're the SEALs, so they always throw in a few surprise events. But basically, there's going to be some paddling, there's going to be some swimming, some running, and they call it the Bridge Challenge because you're climbing about a 70-foot ladder that's maybe a foot wide that we might normally hang out the side of a helicopter. That it's not an easy thing to climb, especially when you're climbing it out of the water up to the top of a bridge.
Do we have any Vegas odds going on?
I think strong money for me would say I'm going to complete the challenge. I don't like to quit, and I don't like to lose.
Talk to me about your race for Congress. You've got some, wives of some state senators. You've got some other people. This was originally 12. It was like a dozen now. And by the way, how many people are in this race now? Tell the audience.
I think it's 10 or 11 folks right now. I can't even keep track of myself sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It was like up to 12 or something, but it's dropped off. But your name comes up as one of the individuals to look at in this race. What has made your race competitive or different, or as the word of my good friend Todd Wilcox, who's running for U.S. Senate, another former U.S. Army.
Green Beret.
That's right. The contrast with your other opponents.
Well, I think there's something very important, for guys like myself, guys like Todd and other folks that have served in the military, because people today, I think they really want somebody to have offered to serve their country before they ever ask to be a leader of their country. I think we have better leaders if they've offered to serve first, and we've seen that one comes very well before the other. People know that if you put on a uniform and you go onto a battlefield and you're willing to give the last breath in your lungs in service to this country, that's not something that you can just flip on and off. It's not a light switch. It's something that's buried much more deeply inside each of us that serve this country. And that's why I think it's important to have veterans up there in D.C. Today, we have less than 1% of the population that serves in the military. We've been at war for the last 15 years. We're going to be at war for the foreseeable future. And we have some of the lowest numbers of veterans between the House and the Senate that we've ever seen. I want to say it's under 80 members of the House and the Senate that have ever served in the military. And of that, I believe there's under a dozen that have seen time in combat. And that's a staggering statistic.
I think in many ways, we need to have some more military values. I see former retired colonels running for like a Port Authority race, and they all sit back and, we don't need the money. We don't need the fame. We just want to bring some good government, lean, conservative government to our local areas out there. And I think people, and I say this, I think it makes you an attractive candidate. No transgender involved there, Brian. I think it makes you an attractive candidate because people like the military, what you guys have gone through, and maybe that's what they figured, that's what they need, and that's what they desire to have in Washington, D.C. That's how I take from it.
Look, I'll tell you what drives me, and hands down, it's the friends that showed me how to serve this country. And I'm going to tell you this, it's not a downer story. I say that as really the most inspirational story that I can tell you. And it's to say that to date in our theaters of war, I've lost 67 friends over the years. And the reason that I say that as an inspirational story is because such men and such women exist in this country that they're willing to give everything that they have for what the United States of America stands for. That's why it's an inspirational story.
All right.
And those folks that I saw serve that way, they taught me how to serve. You serve this country without regard for personal gain and without regard for personal sacrifice.
Brian Mast, we're going to do it again. Brian Mast running for Congress in the U.S. House of Representatives in Congressional District 18, right along the Treasure Coast. You can email him. Go take a look at the website, Mast, M-A-S-T, mastforcongress.com, mastforcongress.com. Brian, it was good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, too.
All right. He's going to be again at the Navy SEAL Museum This is going to be awesome. The Bridge Challenge race that's going to take place along the Treasure Coast, being involved in the Navy SEAL Museum's 3rd Annual Bridge Challenge. More on the other side. Let's talk more military in just a few moments. We continue to move along. Remember, the facts of this radio show are indisputable. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show.